We'll see where it goes.
Makes it easy. Larry was asking. Well,
I don't even have my watch on.
Two minutes. That's on my phone and my watch.
okay. Good evening. Welcome to this evening's work study. The purpose of this evening's work study is to review information regarding the status of certain applications to be brought to us for review at future date during Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing sessions. Because this is a work study, for the Commission to seek information on these matters and not for public public hearing, I do not intend to take public comments or any discussion items this evening. I will, however, provide interested individuals some ample opportunity for public comment at future Planning and Zoning Commission meetings at which these discussion items are placed on public hearing agenda. So with that, I call the meeting to order, and let's have roll call, please.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Roberts?
Here.
Commissioner Dusky?
Here.
Commissioner Zurcher?
Here.
Commissioner Rutherford?
Here.
Here. Vice Chairperson Doritz?
Here.
And Chairperson Yater?
Here. So with that, we'll go to our first scheduled presentation, discussion regarding proposed Prescott Country Club condominiums.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. You have a packet of information. There's additional packets at the back of the room for those in attendance this evening that would like to have this information. Also, agenda materials are in the back of the room on the cart as well. The illustration up on the visual represents zoning within the Prescott Valley portion of the country club, and I draw your attention to parcel C, A, and B. You can see its orientation to the clubhouse, which is the area zone C2 PAD. Manzanita is across the top of the screen, and turquoise across the bottom of the screen. The area identified as C is a multiple family zoning area. When annexed by the town of Prescott Valley, the town staff endeavored to determine the pre-existing zoning of properties prior to annexation. That's a requirement of state law, which requires that the town annex that property with the closest analogous use district. In the case of the R2 PAD, that's a multiple family use district, accommodates multiple family common wall structures, and it is zoned for 75 units. Your packet contains information which is the background for that interpretation, which are minutes from the 1983 Board of Supervisors meeting, wherein they discussed the creation of a variety of densities in the country club, then following acquisition by Jazz Corporation of the country club. Areas B, C, and the existing townhome locations were discussed at that board meeting, and at the conclusion of the board meeting, the Board of Supervisors elected to relegate parcel C with a total of 75 units that were largely distributed throughout the rest of parcels A and B. By doing so, they made a matter of right the development of that property known as Cottonwood Springs with 75 units. The Planning Commission reviewed this matter approximately 1 year ago, during which time a proposal was proffered to place a total of 110 multiple family units on parcels C, A, and B. The application has since been refined to redistribute densities approved on parcel C for 75 total units to parcel B. Parcel A has been withdrawn from the application. So what's being proposed is potentially 40 units on parcel B and 35 units contained within parcel C. Parcel C is currently the maintenance facility for the country club, and parcel B is a rough area, has not been developed. Parcel A, for those who attended the meeting, is a sometimes pond or detention area and will be utilized for that purpose as part of the containment of on-site surface water runoff should development occur. The area immediately to the south of parcel C is Clipper Wash. In the Commission's packet, not only are there minutes from the Board of Supervisors, there's also an interpretation letter that I prepared regarding the zoning actions that have been taken by Yavapai County, leading us to today. There's also correspondence from Steve Mock, the Director of Yavapai County Development Services, concurring with our interpretation. Again, this was in anticipation of the town annexing portions of these properties. During the last review of this matter, there was concern about the lack of detail provided from technical expertise on technical reports. It's on that basis that staff directed that if the application was to mature and come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, it would have to be accompanied by a traffic impact analysis prepared by a registered professional traffic engineer and a on-site drainage study prepared by a civil engineer. Those materials have been received and have been reviewed, and I've outlined the outcome of those studies. But for summary, the traffic impact analysis, the first applications were accompanied by a interpretation or letter ruling by a professional traffic engineer. They used background information in the form of a speed study that was done for Manzanita that was conducted by Yavapai County as the basis to assume the background traffic that would be carried on Montezuma and on Turquoise. That was based on actual counts that had occurred approximately 1 year previous to that interpretation. Yavapai County directed that because they were county roads, a full-blown traffic analysis needed to take place. It's on that basis that a scope of work was prepared, shared with Yavapai County and the town Public Works Department. And after approval of that scope of work, the study was completed. The study presented very conservative numbers from an ITE standard relating to single-family residences. As I described to a member of the country club today, that's based on an ITE standard, International Transportation Engineer Standard, which relegates the number of trips for each single-family residence. And for those who have children at home, you know that you contribute more trips to the infrastructure than people who are typically without children. They used 10 trips per household, which is a standard, again, equating to a residential equivalent for conservative purposes. The applicant has suggested that these would be weekend, mostly condominiums, second homes, however, elected to use the higher, more conservative standard when making his analysis. On the basis of that analysis, it's determined that the level of service afforded by these roads has not been impacted negatively. That is to say, the level of service between level A, which is a very outstanding service level, and level F, which is failure, dictates those levels that are analyzed by a traffic engineer. In the case of the introduction of an additional 500 trips per unit, or 500 trips for the total per day, it does not change the level of service A, which is currently in existence on the roads within the country club. The on-site drainage study was prepared again by a registered professional engineer. It's been reviewed by the town of Prescott Valley and Yavapai County. It's been determined that the on-site detention through treatment with detention and other methods will contain the on-site runoff in a pre-development level. That is to say, no additional runoff will come off from this development than what exists presently. We all know that ultimately that water wants to get to Clipper Wash, and ultimately that's where it's going to go. So there has been some work by Yavapai County Flood Control District to try to address regional improvements to regional drainage in the country club. And quite frankly, a key component to that is working with the golf course folks, because that's where the regional drainage is currently dumped and has been done for a long period of time. The next step, the Planning and Zoning Commission will be conducting field visits tomorrow of this and a variety of other sites that we're going to be discussing later on. But I guess to put a point to the presentation, the applicant is proposing to utilize pre-existing authorized zoning entitlements which exist on Parcel C, and they want to redistribute those to Parcel C as well as to Parcel B on this illustration. No longer are there proposals to utilize Parcel A, which is intended as a future drainage feature. One point of interest is the Yavapai Central Yavapai Fire District Fire Marshal has reviewed this application, and there was concern that these units don't have a secondary access for emergency purposes. There is an exemption in the fire code which is intended to be exercised that requires that every one of these units is sprinklered. Based on the fire code exemption, if they are sprinklered, there's not a requirement for a secondary access to these facilities. With that, I've given you pretty much a general overview. We're going to go into some more depth during our field visit, and this matter, as it matures, will ultimately come to you to be considered as part of a public hearing. Public hearing, unlike a work study, there will be presentations both by the staff as well as by the applicant, and you'll be given an opportunity, as you know, Mr. Chairman, to receive public comment. After that public comment, certainly it's up to you, your prerogative, to determine if you want to take action and forward that matter to the town council. I do not have a specific scheduled date for this application, nor any other of the applications that you're discussing this evening, but as they start to mature, you'll start to see them on the agenda after the proper posting, after the proper advertisement takes place according to law. One thing I do want to talk a little bit about, and this came up as part of a conversation I had with Commissioner Zurcher. I didn't want to put him on the spot. But the state of Arizona, and most importantly, the state legislature passed Prop 207 in, ironically, 2007. Prop 207 is the private property Bill of Rights for property owners in the state of Arizona. And it creates a very meticulous process to where people have to waive their rights for diminution of property values. So in the case of an action taken by the town council as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission, an applicant has to sign a waiver and says that they understand that, the classic example, you rezone a property from residential in this jurisdiction to commercial. Now they can't develop residential, and somebody may argue that you have reduced my land value because I can't do a whole host of things. Now I can only do commercial, I can't do residential. While that sounds absurd, that could be something that could be considered actionable by Superior Court. In this case, the property owners have a vested right to develop 75 units on Parcel C. That issue is without question. So it's on that basis that this Planning and Zoning Commission shall determine, or is encouraged to determine, if the redistribution of those to 2 parcels instead of the concentration of those densities on 1 parcel makes sense. And that is up to you as you start leafing through these materials. I do have, and I know that there was some concern at the neighborhood meeting that materials weren't presented. We have all of the technical reports available. We'll make additional copies if somebody would like to come in and review those materials. I would prefer not copying every engineering report because they are rather lengthy and thick, and it would be at some significant cost to the town. But we'll make them available both at the library, we'll make them available at our offices, and people could make an appointment and come in and take a look at those materials, and if they wanted copies, we would make them copies. With that, I've intended to give you an overview of where we stand on this project, and I'm certainly well prepared to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Richard, and I thank the staff for your diligence and these volunteers up here that have been looking over this information too. Do we have any questions, comments from any?
I do.
Gary?
I just have one question. I know we have the illustration of the buildings in our pamphlet. Will they have renderings when they come before us during the hearing?
Yes, we've encouraged that they embellish considerably the elevations. Commissioner Roberts, there has also been, and I've been kind of the catalyst to point out that there were conditions associated with approval of the 75 units at the Cottonwood Springs area, one of which was the concession that those properties along the north side be single story. What's being proposed is multiple story, 1,200 square foot living quarters, and looking at the size of or configuration of the parcel, such living quarters could be easily erected with a single story, and that could be a concession that could be considered. I've asked the applicant to look into or explore that to see if they can actually accommodate development within a single story. The town of Prescott Valley's height standard is not to exceed 35 feet. Yavapai County, by contrast, is 30 feet. But anybody of any of those properties in the country club can develop up to 30 feet as a matter of right in Yavapai County. But I think as a concession, they should consider single-story units, and I've conveyed that message to their developer, to their agent and the developer as well.
Thank you.
Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Commissioner Rutherford, any questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay.
Richard, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Richard, I read in the paper today that Tom Thurman, Supervisor Thurman, and Joe Hewitt both had some comment relative to some further investigation that they planned on doing. Can you enlighten us more on that?
I watched the neighborhood meeting on television. I didn't watch the entire 2 hours or whatever it took. I just kind of flipped through. Mr. Thurman represented that certain units had been approved. That probably resulted from his research, but I'm very confident that 75 units were approved. Mr. Hewitt, in his role as an engineering technician, and very fine role that he does there, expressed, again, the relevance of the level of service which had been set out in the traffic engineering report. He also pointed out that they ultimately, being Yavapai County, have control over public roads. But I would remind Mr. Hewitt that public roads are just that. You gain access to public roads, you have to abate or address any impact you may have, turning movement improvements and things like that, but you can't prevent somebody from accessing private property from a public road. So beyond that, I don't know what they would do, but ultimately the access permits would rest with Yavapai County, but I would expect that they would be administering an even-handed standard, otherwise they'd be in trouble with the courts.
Thank you.
Since you have the floor, any other comments?
Nothing right now. Thanks.
Commissioner Rankin.
No, I'm good.
Not at this time?
So again, after your field visit, we'll keep you apprised as information is made available, certainly to the public as well. I make myself available. I do apologize. I did get quite a number of phone calls following the neighborhood meeting, but I'll make myself available. My direct phone line is 759-3051, and I pride myself on returning phone calls. You may not necessarily like the words that come out of my mouth, but I'll return your phone call.
You do that.
I do that.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have one more question. Richard, this packet we got was extensive, and it goes clear back to the 1983 county P&Z and county supervisors meetings. At that time, the county supervisors overruled the planning commission and denied the access to what's most commonly referred to as the triangle area for construction there. Do we have any idea why they did that at that time?
I was in the room, actually, in 1983 when that occurred, so I had top-of-mind reference. Having worked for the county at that point in time, there was a lot of emphasis placed on planning by virtue of lack of comment or lack of direction. And I say that with all sincerity. There was no planning process really done in the county, and I know that from firsthand because for a time I was an administrative assistant and then became the county's principal planner in 1985. So they didn't have a lot of planning documents, certainly not to the level that the town does, and they kind of went on gut feeling. The motion was actually made by the representative from the Verde Valley, and it was during a time when there were 3 members on the board. Didn't necessarily have as good a representation as we now have with 5 members on the Board of Supervisors. But I think it was just kind of a gut check. There was some opposition to development both in the Triangle area, actually from also development regarding the townhouses that ultimately were developed. And they elected to relegate those densities. And if I recall reading correctly, they said that they were granting additional units in Parcel C than were requested to make up for their denial. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but that's what it was in 1983. My point being, that's the official record, and that's what we have to go from. We can't necessarily second-guess their judgment.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Matt.
Richard, you stole most of my thunder earlier, so I just want to...
On purpose, I did that.
Thank you. Just to clarify, that the applicant, by matter of right, can build up to 75 condos in Area C. Is that correct?
Yes, and to maybe illustrate that point, if you would permit me, you have a preliminary development plan application for 35 units on Parcel C, which will accompany the zoning map change for the 45 units and preliminary development plan for Parcel B. So you will have an actionable item on your agenda for Area C, as well as a recommendation regarding Parcel B that if you were to act on would take subsequent action by the town council. But conceivably a preliminary development plan, even illustrating 75 units, could be approved by you, and then it would be a matter of final development plan approval to the town council.
And so, again, for clarification, let's just say that we vote down the, anything for Area B, and the applicant comes back and says we want to do 75 in Area C. By essentially still by matter of right, going through this body would still be just essentially a formality at that point, correct?
You have technical standards that they have to meet, certainly on-site drainage and traffic and things like that, height. But yeah, it's very doable.
Thank you, Richard.
Basically, Matt stole what I want to say, but it's still a good process, and I'm glad we're going through this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, and obviously there's some interest from the public, and
Yes, we definitely want to hear
there
that
will be
later.
opportunity in the future for that public comment. I would encourage, though, and I had a good conversation with a couple people from the country club today, communication's two-way. You know, you have to talk and then stop and listen, and there's two parts to that. And so I would hope that the conversation would include additional meetings, some understanding of why things have proposed. Things have changed since 1983 in the country club. I have encouraged the applicant to get with the Property Owners Association and see if they could drop off their technical studies there so that they would be readily available for people to stop and look at, as opposed to driving all the way here. Likewise, I've encouraged them to develop renderings and use the clubhouse that's under their control as a nice location where they can illustrate those things and also have available those studies so people can become informed as to what the circumstances are, and hopefully that'll make sure that we have a nice or more cordial dialogue.
Any other thoughts from the commission? Okay, hearing that, we'll go on to the next agenda item.
And Mr. Scott's going to be presenting that item.
Good evening, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Chairman.
Give us a second.
Yeah. If anybody wants to leave, stretch your legs.
Oh, yeah, I know. Where to get a Band-Aid? Yeah, there you go. What, on that? Yeah, you know, it might be wise. Maybe you can ask Joe. To me, that makes the most sense, rather than people guessing. Good here.
Rick came up with a good idea about the
Okay, thanks. No, nobody's seen that. I know you sent them.
Good.
Yeah, I know, but I've talked to them, and nobody has seen them. I think it would save some time if you did. Yeah, just go through them, and then they won't have to try to dig those questions out, you know?
Test only. I am so sorry.
invite him up, Joe.
Oh, yeah. We're ready?
Yes, I think we can.
He's got
Second thought.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry. just want the next item to be properly presented. The next item is discussion regarding proposed amendments to Stone Ridge Master Development Plan. Mr. Joe Scott.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. This is a discussion on proposed revisions to the Stone Ridge Master Plan and also requested corresponding general plan amendments and zoning map changes that would be necessary to transfer housing densities and types within the projects while retaining the original number of approved residential dwelling units. Staff has provided a detailed background on the request along with documents from the owner and agent, and I'll summarize that here. The Stone Ridge Master Plan for 3,053 residential units was approved in 1998 with a mix of single-family, multifamily, and resort timeshare units. In 2004, the developer requested a revised master plan and rezoning to relocate parcels for multifamily uses and to include the community recreation and commercial lots closer to the core area, south side of Old Black Canyon at the intersection of Stone Ridge Drive. The number of allowed multifamily units remained the same, but some smaller lots intended for attached townhome products were replaced with some larger various size lots that were in demand at the time. The actual number of residential units was reduced by about 220 units from the 5,053 to 2,832. The revised master plan was approved in April 2004. Currently, the applicant's general intent is to retain the original 1998 approved residential units, but to relocate and exchange densities and housing types between the parcels, as discussed in the applicant's narrative, which was provided to you in the master plan, a proposed master plan, which is shown here. As described in the narrative, the biggest changes are the consolidation of the multifamily senior units in Area C, comprised of up to about 20 separate buildings with 35 to 50 units each in 2- or 3-story buildings within the allowed height limits. Previously, there were about 469 multifamily senior units proposed in the project. To reach the increased density of about 900 currently, there are generally transfers of multifamily units previously that were in Area A, B, and D, and the elimination of single-family lots, about 164 in the south area, with the replacement with resort timeshare units, adding about 400 additional multifamily senior units in Area C. And the exhibit here, again, shows the areas identified, and the areas highlighted in yellow, those are the lots single-family lots, which would be eliminated and be used to transfer generally to the Area C for the multifamily senior units. So of the current approved 2,832 residential units, about 1,178 lots have been platted for single-family detached housing products, being approximately 40% of the total. Based on the again proposed number of units, the 3,053 total dwelling units, that would leave remaining about 1,875 residential units to be developed. Of that 870, approximately 905 are now proposed for the multifamily senior units, and 285 for resort timeshare, leaving a remainder of about 685 single-family lots of various sizes to be platted. And to reach the multifamily densities, then several hundred single-family lots would be eliminated as described because of the terrain and cost of development. Both the 1998 and the 2004 master plan indicate significant areas of open space, which are shown on the exhibit here in green. That's what was approved. And these areas have significant landforms, such as hillsides, steep slope areas, and adjacency to prehistoric cultural resources known as the Fitzmaurice Ruins. The proposed multifamily units in Area C will, again, comprised of the 20 separate buildings, are generally are out of these open space areas as shown on the plan. Staff concurs that the more concentrated development will be more efficient and reduces infrastructure costs per unit. Staff suggests the applicant develops more preliminary engineering indicating that what graded pads would look like in the existing terrain. The addition of resort timeshare units in Area H is more challenging. The owner states that the location is to take advantage of possible views, but the terrain is very steep and presently indicated as open space on the approved master plan, specifically because of the geographical features of the site and that development might affect the view sheds of existing developed properties. Staff has no indication of how feasible development is this time, has asked for some better concept plans to be developed. Traffic study was prepared that indicated changes in the housing densities and types and trip generations from the 2004 to the current proposed master plan. The study addresses impacts of roadway designs of Stone Ridge Drive, specifically for Area C. The study provides recommendations for future intersection development. As suggested by Commissioner Dusky, the plan will be updated to include any impacts from a resort timeshare development in Area H. We received confirmation from their Department of Water Resources. The original certificate of assured water supply is more than enough to finish the build-out of the total requested units. A neighborhood meeting was held on March 24th at the Stone Ridge Clubhouse. It was reported that about 175 persons attended. The report will be provided to the Commission prior to public hearing with any public comments that were received. There were a number of questions raised by Commissioner Dusky, and answers were provided by staff and the owner's agent, clarifying unit totals, lands zoned for public land versus open space in the master plan, building heights, development timelines, traffic study, and financial assurances. If you would want to, I could review some of those questions or have the applicant do that if you want more detail on that at this time. And so similar to the last item, a field visit will be conducted tomorrow on this, and a public hearing will be scheduled at a future time. So I'm available as well as the applicant.
We'll do that tomorrow on our site study.
Great.
Since the applicant will be available then.
Review the questions, you mean, or do you want to go over some of those now?
Are there any comments? I'll entertain any comments.
I'd prefer to wait until after the field trip.
Commissioner Dusky?
No, I don't have anything.
I'll wait till after tomorrow.
Matt?
Ditto.
Larry? Go ahead, Larry. Go ahead. You're itching.
Well, I'm looking forward to being able to talk to the developer in this scenario. Some of the things that he's changing in the continuation of the development of the project, changing 64 custom lots in Phase C, or in his Section C, to 800 units in an extremely hilly area really concerns me.
Well, I mean, this would suggest this is a work study that the applicant's agent is here if you wish to review some of that tonight, or if you want to look at it first tomorrow. That's up to you.
Well, Commissioner Rankin, I'm kind of a hands-on guy. I got to see it
Okay.
and touch it. I'd like to do that tomorrow.
No, that's fine.
Hold off? Okay. Commissioner Rogers, okay, we good? Any other comments? Okay, with that, we'll wait for our site study tomorrow. Thank you, Joe. We'll go on to our next agenda item. Okay. Our next item, presentation. Mr. Parker, discussion regarding technical report submittals relative to proposed Glassford Height project.
Hold on a second. Jill, you put that away. Just turn it off. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we had a critical path discussion with the applicant. What that means was we sat down with the traffic engineer, the design engineers that are responsible for doing water and sewer in an area that has previously been not developed. If you recall, you folks looked at a master development plan, and that was done just in a very broad brush format. We subsequent to that received a preliminary development plan identifying the first 2 development units, which comprise 550 residential lots. Associated with that is ultimately coming up with the templates and, moreover, the timeframes or triggers for causing public infrastructure improvements necessary to service a development of 3,800 units. As a result of what I thought was a pretty good dialogue and conflict resolution, if you will, this matter is slated to become come back on your agenda, the meeting in June, which I think is June the 11th or 12th, the second Monday in June. And we're going to be preparing materials and sending you materials over the course of the next several weeks in preparation for us to bring that item formally forward to you. I have executive summaries of a lot of the different materials, and I very much intend to involve you folks in the creation of the bullet points for the development agreement, which will set the thresholds again for certain roadway improvements and those kind of things. While the development agreement is hand in glove with the actual development scenario, the development agreement is really the subject matter of the town council. But I'm asking you in this instance to understand those trigger points and why they are important for water, sewer, roads, and things like that. One thing unique to this proposal that we haven't seen in the past is we're familiar that this is the gateway to all of the granite dells. And certainly I would take you out on a more intimate field visit if we wanted to do that over the course of the next couple of weeks, especially if it's nice. But you know, we've got the Peavine Trail in Prescott that intersects our trail that also goes through the Granite Dells. And that Iron King Trail will continue into the future on those alignments. But key to their marketing approach is the fact that it is the gateway to the Dells. So there's going to be a lot of effort towards having a sense of arrival to where you land there and there's a area where you can get on the trail or you can picnic and do those kind of things. So you'll actually see the public park area that ultimately will be turned over to the town come as part of the very first phases of the development, which is very unusual. Usually you see the development go and then the parks and all the amenities come later. This is going to be led by all those amenities because they believe that's what is going to attract people to the table. One of the major aspects of the traffic impact analysis was looking at it regionally as it relates to CYMPO's regional model for traffic in the Quad Cities. And one of the issues that ADOT and Yavapai County were very concerned about was what they saw was a need for an additional traffic interchange intermediate between Glassford Hill and the Prescott Dells area. And the analysis clearly shows that a additional traffic interchange at that location is actually going to slow traffic down because of the merging that takes place when you're going on and off of interchange. So there is recommendations, and I'm going to be specific about those recommendations to you so you understand how comprehensive their review has been. They've actually identified certain improvements, not to the main line, meaning to Glassford Hill, but rather to cross streets like the Santa Fe Loop as it intersects the main line, because that's where things start to fail. Not just because of this development, but because of all development that has gone before. Some other things that are being contemplated now is that Stone Ridge, traversing to the north, would be part of this project. Previously, it was not something that was considered as part of the scope of the project, but they found through that analysis that at full build-out, that has to be there for the system to work. So nearer the end than the beginning, there will be a trigger point where Stone Ridge Drive will be developed to its full width right-of-way development. And again, that's a different approach because the current surface streets within the town of Prescott Valley will carry the initial development, both with a new route through Granville, as well as then the Santa Fe Loop, which is intended as a major arterial. But those are some things that I'd like to start to introduce you to. So it's not on the field visit for tomorrow, but I would offer that we could probably not put you in a van, but we could put you in some other mode of surface transportation, get special permission, and actually drive out on the Iron King Trail, and you can kind of get a better understanding of what Phase 1 would be, where those phases would occur. Very spectacular, and that will be the westerly-most development for the town of Prescott Valley. Now, putting that all in perspective as well, if you look to the north as you move northward from those two sections, there's another 7 sections of land, which is 7 miles to the north, which will be part of Prescott Valley, which will be the growth corridor, which at least this planner believes will occur into the coming decades. So that's going to be something that obviously as this thing unfolds, you'll see developers looking across 89A to the north to develop their future in the town of Prescott Valley. Should be interesting. With that, again, I can certainly bring the reports, and if that's something you'd like to get to that detail, they actually read better than most of the revisions to the revisions because you can follow along, starting with what's out there now, grassland, and what challenges do we have. We need 2 million gallons of water. We need to hook to sewer lines that are at this kind of capacity that need to be this big, and those kind of things as they snowball, so to speak, down the development track. But it's rather interesting to see. This project will probably take between $25 and $30 million to get the motor running from the onset. So that's the kind of investment you're talking about in getting this thing up and operational.
Thank you, Richard. I would entertain comments.
Excuse me. Yeah, Richard, could you reiterate again the comment you made about Stone Ridge Drive? Are you talking about the existing Stone Ridge Drive or over up by...
North, it'll be north of 69, Rick, and that will be the connection between the Glassford Heights and Highway 69. It'll
okay,
run,
so that's the area over there by Hobby Lobby or that...
yes, it'll ultimately drain traffic down to the crossroads, yes. But it'll actually be mostly on state trust lands. A portion of it is private property. But you drive out of your development and you just look north and you can project that road all the way up to 89A.
Okay, but it doesn't impact the existing Stone Ridge Drive?
It does not, other than it will mirror the profile that Stone Ridge Drive is intended to be, and that's a 5-lane section, 2 lanes going either direction with turning movements on a center median.
That just looks like a natural ingress right there. Flowing through.
If I was going to spend that kind of money, and I understand that there's more money for Stone Ridge Drive, but I'd want my window to the world that I would control.
Yeah.
I'd want to have a monument out there saying Parkerville.
Not in this lifetime.
Yeah. The dark side.
Okay.
Arta can tell you all about that.
Is there any other entertain anything else? Well, thank you very much, Richard. And with that, I'm going to adjourn this. Oh, wait a minute. Matt's got a question.
Just for the record, what time is the field visit tomorrow?
2:30.
2:30.
Oh, okay.
That's all I want. Thank you.
We'll have you back in time for your nap.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If I could take a nap in the afternoon, I would.
I don't know, this side maybe. No. No. Go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to adjourn this and reconvene to regular session. I'm sorry we're not taking comments from the public tonight. Later on.
Sometime between 2:30 and when we conclude. Sometime after 2:30.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. I'm going to adjourn this portion.